Hello, buddy. All right. Welcome to the Mikestand. Today, of course, is Friday, January the 30th, 2026. Second to the last day of January. So basically, when we come back on Monday, we'll be into February, the second month. So we're just about done with. In fact, for that matter, we'll be into February on Sunday when we come back for the historical comic retrospect. Of course, a friendly reminder to everybody, as always, if you guys haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more, if um, if we can get some more friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here that we talk about tonight grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, as we just sit here, wait for more people to show up. We'll probably just hang out for a moment while we're waiting, and then of course, we'll talk about what's on tap for tonight, from the main story to to like what else we'll be doing on the show tonight. La 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 la. La 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 la. Let's see. Um, yeah, so basically had to get all caught up on a whole bunch of my subscriptions today, so didn't get a chance to watch any cartoons this afternoon. So I'll be doing that after the show, of course. Um, did see some pretty interesting stories, some features and all that. Of course, a lot of the talk surrounding a lot, on the wrestling side of things, anyways, the Royal Rumble tomorrow night. But we'll talk more about that in a bit here. Let's see. So yeah, we're now coming up, getting close to the 3 minute mark here. So I guess I'll just talk about what's on tap for next. So I do have one article I'm going to go over from MeTV Tunes, talking about the Flintstones. So on MeTV Tunes, William Hanna had revealed all of the almost Flintstones eras, a modern Pilgrim family. So we're gonna see some of that, see what they were talking about in terms of possible other time periods that the Flintstones may have decided to set them in, as opposed to the prehistoric era. Also, after that, we'll also get all caught up on all the latest in pro wrestling. Look back to, of course, last night's Impact and Ring of Honor shows. Look ahead to tonight's. Now, today's SmackDown did actually already, since it was over in Riyadh, it was actually shown for the international markets already. Um, but it hasn't been shown for the U.S. market yet. So therefore, we will treat it as if it's still, even though the result. I know if you wanted to, you probably go find the results already, but we're not going to talk about the results of SmackDown and of course Royal Rumble until Monday. As to not spoil it for those who want to actually have the experience of watching the show. And then of course we'll look ahead to tomorrow night, Royal Rumble as well as AEW Collision, and then we'll finish things off with this day in each history. So with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started then on our material here? Let's go ahead and take a look at tonight's article in regards to the Flintstones here. So here's the headline. William Hanna revealed all of the Almost Flintstones eras, a modern Pilgrim family. Article is published today by MeTV Toon staff. So let's go ahead and see what they have to say here. So it's hard to imagine the Flintstones as anything other than cavemen. But that wasn't the first idea Hanna-Barbera had for them. It had for them. And they did interact with other time periods, of course. The 1987 film The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones comes to mind. Anyways, in 1960, John Mitchell, the head of sales for Columbia Pictures and Screen Gems, approached William Hanna and Joseph Barbera with an idea to create a cartoon for primetime. Hanna and Barbera were initially hesitant, but Mitchell was persistent and excited about the concept. Mitchell had been a huge part of Hanna-Barbera's early success in getting them on television, but at this point their cartoons were 5 to 7 minutes each and mostly aired on Saturdays because that was when children watched cartoons. Now, mind you, of course, a lot of their earlier stuff, like Rough and Ready, Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, Quick Draw McGraw. They were anthology shows where, like Yogi Bear was actually born out of the Yogi Bear show was born out of the Huckleberry Hound show, in which they were 5 to 7 minutes long because what they would do is they would package 3 cartoons, usually as part of a rotation. Like, for example, Huckleberry Hound, initially it was Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, and then Pixie, Dixie, and Mr. Jinx, until Yogi became so popular he got his own cartoon show, and then of course, Yogi was replaced by Hokey Wolf on the Huckleberry Hound show, and Yogi's lineup was Yogi, Snagglepuss, and Yankee Doodle, and this formula was used by, at least on the comedy side of it, the more like comedic cartoons for Hanna-Barbera were more like this. Throughout the 60s, you had the new cartoon, the Hanna-Barbera new cartoon show that had, of course, Wally Gator, Two-Shaped Turtle, and Dum Dum, and then I can't think of the other one, but you also had, of course, Peter Potamus later with Peter Potamus, Breezely and Sneezely, and Winnie Witch, I believe. So you had, a lot of these cartoons that were set up this way, where they'd have they'd focus in on 3 characters and they'd each get their own little 5 to 7 minute, short in the main cartoon. So anyways, simultaneously, so now with the Flintstones in 1960, of course, this was still a few years before, again, Adamant and Secret Squirrel, Peter Potamus, Magilla Gorilla, and all that. So anyways, simultaneously, Hanna-Barbera was the only animation studio making cartoons for television. They realized that if they didn't move in on the half-hour primetime format, someone else would. So now, mind you, so the Flintstones was their first venture, and that would eventually lead to us getting, of course, Top Cat and Johnny Quest later. So someone else would. And much later, of course, Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. That was another one that they did much later. Together, the 3 of them brainstormed and came to the conclusion that they all loved the Honeymooners and could build a similar half-hour cartoon with 2 couples. Creatively developing the characters proved to be a struggle, At the time, Hanna-Barbera mostly had animal-themed cartoons. This would be their first human-first venture. In other words, what they're talking about is prior to the Flintstones, they'd only been doing like the anthropomorphic animal characters um, up until that point. Even Tom and Jerry, even though they never spoke, Tom and Jerry, who Hanna-Barbera created for MGM back in the 40s, back in 1940, were still considered anthropomorphic because, like, for example, they would, they'd be traveling around on their hind legs, standing up like humans do. So let's see. The question they were asking themselves was what kind of people would make a primetime cartoon worth watching? Now, of course, this is also long before The Simpsons and Futurama and all that. So, obviously, the Flintstones and later the Jetsons, these type of cartoons were, these type of animated shows were probably comparatively mild compared to what some of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s kind of started getting hold of. In a 1979 Jim Longworth interview, Hannah brought up, quote, "We actually tried them in Roman costumes, um, and we had them as pilgrims. We had them as contemporary people. A pilgrim cartoon may sound far-fetched, but Hanna-Barbera kept the Roman idea around for a later cartoon called The Roman Holidays." Yeah, actually, I think some of these ideas they did a bit, at least. So you had the Stone Age, you had the Romans, and then you had pilgrims, and you had modern day. You had, of the four, Hanna-Barbera would eventually make three of those ideas come true. The Flintstones being the first, and then of course they just mentioned the Roman holidays here, and then I mentioned Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, two step more. And well, Wait Till Your Father Gets Home was more of a, they didn't have two couples, they just had more of a family. But the idea of an animated family sitcom, you know, with all these, and then of course you had the Jetsons come a couple years after the Flintstones. So you had the idea, the animated family sitcom, starting with the Flintstones, and then you had other other variations show up later. So in Hannah's autobiography, A Cast of Friends, he also mentions, quote, "They were designed as Indians, as gypsies, even as pilgrims. No one was really thrilled by any of it. The sparks weren't flying." Joe Barbera also mentions the creative development. Quote, "We thought about a family with kids, without kids, with a tall husband and a short wife, a nagging mother-in-law, a dog, a cat, no pets. Then we thought about a farmer and his family, which led to a hillbilly family. And of course, Hanna-Barbera would come up with a hillbilly family later, the Hillbilly Bears. Again, part of one of the other anthology shows. So a lot of this stuff did actually come to fruition, just not at the time of the Flintstones, obviously. And soon we were slipping back in history. We came up with a pilgrim family with wide collars and high hats, then a Roman family with togas and helmets. Nothing worked. Nothing clicked. The project seemed pretty much to be a lost cause, unquote. Who would save the lost cause? Animator Dan Gordon. During a brainstorming session, Gordon quickly drew a sketch of two cavemen dressed in skins, and next to them was a phonograph with a little bird using its beak to play the record. Hannah said of the sketch, quote, "When we saw Dan's drawing, I think we all recognized the gag potential for a cartoon show that burlesqued modern conveniences, in parentheses, as we knew them in 1960, on parentheses there. Yeah, where you get like a lot of these appliances, as it were, making comments here and there throughout the show, it's a living, right? Hey, Natsumi, thanks for dropping in. If you haven't already, if you can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, as we continue on here with this story, of course, let's see, and adapting them to the Stone Age, unquote. Thus, the Flintstones were born. Just kidding. The original name Hanna-Barbera had for them was the Flagstones. They even pitched the show to networks as the Flagstones, but they hit a snag and faced a lawsuit because there was a comic strip, High and Lois, where the family name was the Flagstones. As Hannah put it, quote, our Stone Age family was having an identity crisis. Our primitive primetime entry was happily rechristened the Flintstones, a name so appropriate to the show's character that today I can't imagine that it could have been called anything else, unquote. Now, can you imagine the Flintstones as a pilgrim family in the late 17th century? Or, or set in modern. Well, again, these ideas still ended up the idea, these little subplots for the animated family sitcom did eventually find their way. You of course had the Jetsons come a couple years later in 1962, where you had a animated family sitcom set in the future. You'd have the Roman holidays and Wait Till Your Father comes home come out in the early to mid 70s. There, the Roman holidays set in Roman times, and then Wait Till Your Father gets home. Being set in modern times. So you basically had these ideas weren't necessarily rejected for the moment, but eventually did make for a copy, as they call it. So, anyways, hey Bone, howdy Bone. Anyways, so let's see now. So the last little pitch here: watch the Flintstones on BTV Tunes weekdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 Central, 2:30 Pacific. Saturdays and Sundays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 Central, and 4:30 Pacific. Now, mind you, that's currently, but starting Monday, the Flintstones will be moving up an hour. They'll be moving to they'll be actually moving to 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 Central, 3:30 Pacific, as part of a program, part of a schedule changing starting in February here. So starting February 2nd, their weekday schedule, they'll move up an hour earlier. as we noted, was a week or so ago when we looked over the new lineup coming to MeTV Tunes, and introducing some of the new cartoons coming in, like Crypto the Superdog, Tasmania, among others. So anyway, so let's see, 22 minutes. So yeah, we need to see what we can. All right. So I did have a backup thing. Backup plan if we did run a little short there, which it looks like we did. As usually the MeTV Tunes stories tend to go pretty quickly. Nice little profile pieces. So what I decided to do, since of course we were talking about the Flintstones, and looking back to an interview Hanna-Barbera did, talking about what ideas for in terms of the setting and location they kept coming up with. So with that, what I decided to do with that is one of the other things we're going to also look at here. Look at the voice acting career of a legend who was associated with the Flintstones, Gene Vanderpill. Of course, provided the voice of Wilma Flintstone, also provided the voice of Rosie the Robot in the Jetsons, as well as and actually, aside from those two, probably her two most famous works, of course, she also lent her voice to a number of other Hanna-Barbera characters and cartoons. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at Gene Vanderpill's career here as part of tonight's coverage. Let's get into this. First, I'll look over some of the basic details here. Born Gene Thurston Vanderpill, October 11, 1919, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Passed away on October 10th, 1999, Dana Point, California, at the age of 79. She was, of course, a voice actress. Was active from 1939 to 1997. She was married twice and had 4 children. So, anyways, let's take a little peek at Miss Vanderpill. A little bit of a bio here. So Gene Thurston Vanderpill, October 11, 1919 to April 10th, 1999, 79, as was previously mentioned, was an American voice actress. Although her career spanned many decades, she is best known as the voice of Wilma Flintstone for the Hanna-Barbera cartoon The Flintstones. In addition to Wilma Flintstone, she also provided the voices of Pebbles Flintstone in The Flintstones, Baby Pebbles. Of course, later on, Sally Struthers would provide the voice of the teenage Pebbles in the Pebbles and Bam Bam show in 1971. Rosie the Robot Maid from the Jetsons. Goldie, Lola Glamour, and Nurse LaRue, and other characters in Top Cat. Winsome Witch on the Secret Squirrel show. And Ogie on the Magilla Gorilla show. Now, as I understand it, Gene Vanderpill also had an amateur radio career too, along with a number of other, famous voice actresses, like of course her partner in crime on the Flintstones early on, Bea Benaderet. Mae Quetzal. So let's see. So early life and career. Vanderpill was born in Philadelphia to John Howard and Kathleen Hale Vanderpill. Gene's grandfather had come from the Netherlands. Her father was the district manager for Knit Underwear. Her mother was from Tennessee. The two died within 6 months of each other in the early 1950s. In 1939, Vanderpil was already working as a radio actress. She was heard during the early 1950s on such programs as The Hall's Way, or The Halls of Ivy, 1950 to 1952, as well as Father Knows Best, on which she portrayed Margaret Anderson. In parentheses, the role was played on television by Jane Wyatt. On parentheses there. So she played Margaret Anderson on the radio version of Father Knows Best. Um, Vanderpil made numerous TV appearances as an actress in programs such as Leave It to Beaver, The Donna Reed Show, Father Knows Best, Beverly Hillbillies, That Girl, Petticoat Junction, where, of course, she once again probably crossed paths with her Flintstones castmate, B. Benaderet, as B. Benaderet was portrayed Kate Bradley on Petticoat Junction. She also had a cameo appearance in the 1994 live-action film version of The Flintstones as Mrs. Feldspar, an elderly woman in a conga line right behind Dino. One of her final TV appearances was in the opening scene of the season 2 Murder She Wrote episode One Good Bid Deserves a Murder. Now we'll look at our voice work here, and then we'll just stop after that. So let's see. Vanderpil is best known as the voice of Wilma Flintstone in the original Flintstones television series, which ran, of course, from 1960 to 1966. She told an interviewer in 1995 that she received $250 per episode for making the Flintstones. And in 1966, when the series ended, she opted to accept $15,000 in lieu of residual payments from syndication. The Flintstones ran in syndication across the globe for decades. At the time, Vanderpil lived in San Clemente, California, and remarked, quote, "If I got residuals, I wouldn't live in San Clemente. I'd own San Clemente." Yeah, I mean, that's probably something else, too, because the Flintstones, of course, I'm sure we've all grown up, even those of us who were born after Flintstones' original run, because it was a syndicated giant. People often like to pair in their viewing. I mean, they even do it on MeTV Tunes. You often find the Flintstones and the Jetsons paired together. A lot of times, and now probably it was she opted for because she didn't think that the residuals would be that much because it probably wouldn't do well in syndication. But the Flintstones in syndication proved to be, and with all the other with of course all the other movie stuff coming out and stuff like that. Yeah, she could have been, if she had taken residuals, she could have been as well as the other actor, voice actors from the show probably could have been pretty rich, or at least made a good living for themselves. But let's see, most of Vanderpil's voice acting work was for Hanna-Barbera Studio, as I mentioned earlier, for which she played her first voice in 1958 on an episode of the Huckleberry Hound Show, voicing an actress character in Showbiz Bear. An episode on the Yogi Bear segment, she did additional voices, such as the narrator and Southern Belles and Beautiful Girls on the Quick Draw McGraw Show, Snagglepuss, and the Yogi Bear Show. In 1961 and 62, Vanderpil played Nurse LaRue, Charlie the Baby, Goldie, Lola Glamour, and additional voices in multiple episodes of Top Cat. And in 1962, she performed a particularly memorable role, that of Rosie, the Jetsons' robotic maid, 23 years later, in 1985, she reprised a Rosie character on the returning series. The 1985 series is the series that gave us, of course, introduced us to Orbity, right? Let's see now. All right. In later years, Vanderpil did the voices of Ma Rugg and her daughter Floral Rugg on a rural set cartoon, The Hillbilly. This is one of the ones I was talking about. It's kind of the you can almost argue it's kind of the animated version of the Beverly Hillbillies, right? But instead of humans, of course, you have hillbilly bears, as well as Winsome Witch. Both cartoons being segments on the Adamant Secret Squirrel show that ran from 1965 to 1967. She was also the voice of Little Ogie on the Magilla Gorilla show. In 1969, she guest starred on the Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode Foul Play in Funland, playing Sarah Jenkins. During the 1970s, Vanderpil was the voice of Margie Huddles, the main character's wife on Where's Huddles, a role similar to that of Wilma Flintstone, and on which she was reunited with Flintstone's castmates Alan Reed and Mel Blanc. She went on to voice Mrs. Pinkerton on Inside Private Eye, and several female characters on Hong Kong Phooey, The Tom and Jerry Show, and Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. During the 1980s and 1990s, Vanderpil did voices on Mr. T, Snorks, and Yogi's Treasure Hunt, as well as the Flintstone Kids as Mrs. Slaghoople. She reprised the Wilma Flintstone character on spin-off series and films such as the Flintstone Comedy Hour, the new Fred and Barney Show, the Flintstone Comedy Show, the Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, as I mentioned earlier, Yabba Dabba Doo, Holly Rockabye Baby, and the Flintstones Christmas Carol. Yeah, just as Jackson Beck, Jack Mercer, and Mae Quetzal were synonymous with a lot of the Popeye franchise. Alan Reed, and then later, then after Alan Reed's passing in 1937, Henry Corden, along with, of course, Gene Vanderpil and Mel Blanc, were synonymous with the Flintstones. Her final roles were that of Wilma Flintstone on What a Cartoon episode Dino Stay Out in 1995, on A Flintstone Family Christmas in 1966, and on The Weird Al Show in 1997. So there you go. So there's a look at the career of one of Hanna-Barbera's most prolific voice actresses in Wilma Flintstone there, or Gene Vanderpil. So anyways, let's see now. What else could I? Well, let me see. Wow, 34 minutes. I think we still could have another. If I could find something else to talk about here. Let me see. Well, actually, one of the other things I guess I could talk about here a little bit, just reminding everybody that starting, of course, this coming Monday, February the 2nd, MeTV Tunes will be starting up their new, will be making some changes to their lineup around in the afternoons there. Let me just see if I can talk about that a little bit here. Of course, starting this Monday, um, of course, um, Tasmania will be making its MeTV Tunes debut. The regular show, they actually did have the Tasmania Christmas special during the "Tis the Season for Tunes" block throughout the month of December. But the regular show will be making its debut at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 Central, 1:30 Pacific on this coming Monday, February 2nd, with of course the Scooby Doo show moving from 4:30 Eastern to 5 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 Central, 2 Pacific. The Scooby, in this case, it'll be Scooby's All Star Laugh Olympics, which was kind of the all star, Hanna-Barbera cartoon, based in 1977, a year after the, and then starting at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 Central, 2:30 Pacific on Monday. Will moving the Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound shows to that time slot in which they'll be rotating back and forth. So this Monday, of course, they'll be doing Yogi Bear show, and then once I guess they run the cycle of Yogi Bear episodes from 1961-62, then they'll rotate, of course, Huckleberry Hound. They'll be like that for the foreseeable future. And then of course the Jetsons and Flintstones hour, which right now is at from 5 to 7 East or 5 to 6 Eastern, will move to the 6 o'clock Eastern hour. The Jetsons moves from 5 p.m. Eastern to 6 Eastern, 6 Eastern, 5 Central, 3 Pacific, and then followed up by the Flintstones on at 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central, 3:30 Pacific. So let's see, and that's the changes coming this Monday, and of course more changes will be coming over the weekend and over the following Saturday and Sunday. I think the weekend changes, some of the additions there will happen on the weekend of the 14th and 15th, from what I understand. So let's see. So yeah. So I guess now we can go ahead with that being said. Guess we can go ahead and now move on to wrestling wrap up here. As we'll first take a look back, of course, at last night's Impact and Ring of Honor shows, Ring of Honor Club. So on last night's TNA Impact, coming from the Tingley Coliseum in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with Tom Hannafan and Matthew Ringwald on commentary, the show opened up with the System, the new System, as it were, led by, of course, Eddie Edwards with Brian Myers, Prime, Cedric Alexander, and Bear Bronson, explaining why they turned heel and why they turned on, of course, both JDC and Moose, with Alicia Edwards coming out, pointing out her contracts coming up with TNA, hinting at a possible departure on her part, albeit she is also part of the marketing department, so people aren't sure if she's going to be leaving or not. So after that, of course, segment, then the show opened up match-wise with Nick Nemeth defeating BDE in what was said to be a pretty good matchup. Brandon Does Everything, the YouTuber, going 11 minutes 37 seconds there, with Nemeth getting much of the offense in throughout the match before Brent BDE starting to get a flurry at the end there, only for Nemeth's experience to shine through and get the win in the end there. The non-title match. Let's see, international champion and NXT Heritage Cup champion Shanzine Lorenzo defeated the hometown man in just under 6 minutes. Ariana Grace in his corner. A little bit of a note here: it would seem that Ariana Grace may have truly had a change of heart, as after having a moment with her father on last week's Impact, she apparently, as Channing Lorenzo, was going to try to use the international title to get to hit hometown man. She got the title away from him. He eventually still cheated, but there seemed to be some drama going on there. Then the next match saw Elijah defeat Jason Hotch in just under 8 minutes, as of course Elijah's feud with Order 4 continues. Then we have a backstage segment where Knockout Jada Stone was about to have an interview, only to be interrupted by Order 4, and then getting knocked down, of course, by Tasha Steelz, only for Elijah to come in and make the save, setting up a match for next week's Impact of Elijah and Jada Stone to take on Tasha Steelz and Mustafa Ali of Order 4. Then in her in-ring debut, Elena Black defeated former NWA star Ruthie J in 2 minutes and 46 seconds. And the main event saw, in a no-holds-barred match, Rich Swann defeated AJ Francis in 16 minutes 22 seconds. So that's pretty much all that went down on Impact last night, as they continue to build towards their upcoming next upcoming pay-per-view, which I believe is No Surrender. But now let's go ahead and get ready to take a look at what went down on last night's Ring of Honor show. On last night's Ring of Honor, which aired on ringofhonorwrestling.com and took place from the HEB Center at Cedar Park in Cedar Park, Texas, with Caprice Coleman and Ian Riccaboni on commentary. The opening match saw a proving ground match for the Ring of Honor Women's World title, in which, if of course the challenger had either survived the time limit or beaten the champion, would earn a shot at the Women's World title on a later date. Athena successfully staved off the challenge of Vert Vixen at 6 minutes 53 seconds. And another singles match, Adam Priest defeated Anthony Henry in 7 minutes 20 seconds. Tommy Billington, of course, the modern day Dynamite Kid, the nephew of the original Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington, defeated Aaron Solo in just over 5 minutes 22. And Katsuyori Shibata of the Ops defeated JD Drake in 5 minutes 26 seconds. In a women's tag team match, Hyan and Maya World defeated the team of Lady Bird Monroe and Viva Van in just over 4 minutes. The main event saw CMLL's Mascara Dorada defeat Tony Nese of the Premier Athletes with Mark Sterling in his corner. So now that's all we got for, of course, on the Ring of Honor, looking back to last night. So let's look ahead to tonight. Now, I'll remind you once again, of course, SmackDown was already shown internationally. So the results are already up for the SmackDown show. But since they haven't been shown here in the States yet, since the show not aired here in the States yet, we're only going to preview it. I'll probably go over the results on Monday of what happened. And of course, we'll also look ahead to the let me see. So, for those of you still waiting to watch SmackDown later on tonight, this is basically what you have to look forward to. Is SmackDown took place. SmackDown took place from the King Abdullah Financial District in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with Wade Barrett and Michael Cole on commentary, and it'll air on the U.S. A network. Tonight, as this is the go home SmackDown before tomorrow night's Royal Rumble, Carmelo Hayes will be defending the United States title against Rey Fenix. In tag team action, Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair will take on Liv Morgan and Roxanne Perez, a battle of two former Women's World Tag Team Champions. Johnny Gargano takes on one half of Fraction Axiom, who will have, of course, Nathan Frazier in his corner. The Miz takes on Ilya Dragunov, as Dragunov looks to get some revenge on Miz for costing him the U.S. title. In an 8-man tag team match, we'll see on one side you'll have Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, Jey Uso, and Sami Zayn to take on the Vision of Braun Breaker, Logan Paul, Bronson Reed, and Austin Theory, with Paul Heyman in their corner. But also, oh wait, that's right. We won't go over. As I said, we won't. Almost spoiled something else there, but anyways, but now let's go ahead and move ahead to tomorrow night's Royal Rumble, which will also be taking place from the King Abdullah Financial District, as I understand it. Tomorrow night's Royal Rumble, which as I said, and I was correct in that, will be taking place from the King Abdullah Financial District Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, airing on ESPN. Of course, the four matches that are, of course, you have the two Royal Rumble matches going on. Also going on tomorrow night, AJ Styles and Gunther in what could be AJ's last WWE match, as if he does not defeat Gunther, he'll be forced to retire from the WWE. In a match for the undisputed WWE title, Drew McIntyre will face the challenge of Sami Zayn. And then, as we said, of course, the men's and the women's Royal Rumbles matches, with the winners getting a WWE title shot of their choice at Royal Rumble. So, not at Royal Rumble, at WrestleMania. So now let's go ahead and take a look also at what will be going down on tomorrow night's Collision from AEW. talking about what will be going on tomorrow night's Collision. I believe that will be airing on TNT, I believe. As soon as I... So tomorrow night's Collision, it will be live, coming on the Esports Stadium Arlington in Arlington, Texas. Matches signed for tomorrow night's show include Darby Allin taking on Clark Connors of the New Japan faction Unbound Company. The tag team known as The Crew, Action Andretti and Leo Rush, will be answering the challenge of AEW recent signees, the Rascals. In this case, it's going to be Desmond Xavier and Zachary Wentz. The Babes of Wrath of Harley Cameron and Willow Nightingale defend the AEW Women's World Tag Team titles against the Sisters of Sin of Sky Blue and Julia Hart. And then, upon answering the open challenge on Wednesday night, Tommaso Ciampa will be taking on Mark Briscoe to try to come to new TNT. Now, Tommaso Ciampa made his appearance on Dynamite to after having left the WWE, and he was able to sign anywhere. And as I said earlier in the week, not letting the grass grow under his feet, he made a clear decision, and he talked about that in an interview he did recently as well, that it just made sense to him. It's like, if it was like back in the 90s, it would have been ECW. If it was like the early 2000s, it would have been Ring of Honor. And he still may get it, since he signed to AEW, of course, he may actually get a chance to actually work in Ring of Honor as well here. So, all right. So that's all we got for the wrestling wrap-up then. So with that being said, today is Friday, January the 30th, 2026. As I said, it is the second to the last day of January. So when we come back on Sunday for the historical comic retrospect, I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment here. We'll be into February, we'll be into the second month. But with that, as today, as I said, is Friday, January the 30th, 2026, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. History! So 2002, 2011, and 2021. All right. So first off, we're going to head back 24 years ago today. As on this date, 24 years ago today, back in 2002. I'll bring that up, of course. On this date in the year 2002, 24 years ago, the 20th issue of Meridian from CrossGen went on sale on this date back in 2002. It sold for $2.95, with 32 pages. The story was written by Barbara J. Kessel, in parentheses, Randall, penciled by Steve McNiven, inked by Tom Simmons, with lettering done by Troy Pateri and Dave Lamphere, and coloring done by Maury Hollowell. So, 24 years ago today, the 20th issue of Meridian went on sale on newsstands on this date back in 2002. Now, of course, moving ahead to the next piece of niche history here. As we move ahead to the year 2011, now it's 15 years ago today, WWE held its Royal Rumble on this date in the year 2011 from the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. The show the show opened up with Edge retaining the World Heavyweight Championship over Dolph Ziggler. Dolph Ziggler, who had Vicky Guerrero in his corner. The Miz, with Alex Riley in his corner, retained the WWE Championship over Randy Orton. Eve Perez would win the Divas Championship in a four-way match over champion Natalia and the team of Lay Cool, Mishoma Cool, and Layla. And then Albert Del Rio won the Royal Rumble match itself. So 15 years ago today, and then in a dark match prior to the show, R-Truth defeated Kurt Hawkins to earn a spot in the Royal Rumble. So there we go with that. And finally, as we move ahead to the year 2020, on this date in the year 2021, we actually had a couple of passings on this date. So on this date, a pair of individuals passed. On Mark Wilmore, an American television writer who worked on The Simpsons, The PJs, and F is for Family, producing comedian. He provided, Mark Wilmore passed away at the age of 57. Mark Wilmore was an American television writer, producer, actor, and comedian. He wrote and performed for shows such as In Living Color, The PJs, The Simpsons, and F is for Family. Wilmore was a 10-time Primetime Emmy Award nominee. He was the younger brother of comedian Larry Wilmore. Now, as I understand it, he was one of those who unfortunately succumbed to COVID-19, according to this right here. So, and also on this date in the year 2021, 5 years ago, American television producer and writer Alan Burns passed away from Parkinson's. He worked with Jay Ward Productions and Lewy body dementia. He passed away at the age of 85 from Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia. Now, he was probably best known for co-creating and writing for the television sitcoms The Munsters and Mary Tyler Moore Show. But before he did that, before breaking into television and film, he started in animation, working for Jay Ward and collaborating on and animating The Rocky and Bullwinkle Show, Dudley Do-Right, and George of the Jungle. Burns also created Captain Crunch character for Quaker Oats. So basically, he got his start with Jay Ward Productions. All right, so that's all we got for you guys tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. Let's see. Of course, we'll be back on Sunday. I'll be joined by my co-host for the week, the Metal from the Vomitorium, as we'll be finishing up our coverage of comics that went on sale in July of 1940. We'll be finishing up our coverage of July 1940. We'll be looking at books that went on sale from Standard, known then as Better Books, Street Smith, and United Feature Syndicate. We'll be, of course, taking a quick little preview peek at United Comics #1 from 1940 from United Feature Syndicate, and Bill Barnes Comics #1 from Street Smith, before getting into reading from exciting comics, thrilling comics rather, #8 from Standard. So with that, and then of course we'll be back here on Monday with all the latest in the world of Nietzsche. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And I will see you all on Sunday. Bye.